Well, since today it's all about really tough as nails plants that can handle brutal exposures because they're dry, they're hot, they're windy, they are just really difficult areas to grow anything. So it's all about that today, but I want to know, I've shared my 5 with you in this video. I want you to tell me, make sure to put your zone, make sure to tell what special varieties or cultivars that you like, but you let me know what you would put on your bulletproof shrub list for hot and sunny locations. Well, it has really gotten hot. Today it's supposed to get up to 96, and this inspired the topic for today, which is about 5 really bulletproof shrubs that can handle brutal exposures like this one right here in the corner of my property, where it is pretty much circumscribed by concrete. It's got my neighbor's drive to the west, and it's got the street to the south, and this is just a really hot, brutal location. And so what I'm going to share today are 5 plants that can handle this type of locale, this type of really difficult gardening situation. So my number 1 candidate is just a drift rose. This is just called a pink drift rose. It is beautiful. It starts out a really dark pink, and then as the sun has its way with it, it turns more white. This started out as a 1-gallon shrub probably 10 years ago, and you can see how large it's grown. So it also takes up a really good bit of real estate. Also notice that there is not a hint of black spot or anything on it. Now, one thing it does require, because it's got a little bit of maintenance to it, if I want it to keep reblooming, which it will, though its heaviest flush is definitely in the spring and then subsequently in the fall, but it does require deadheading. But it's very disease resistant, deer resistant. It's a blend between a carpet rose and miniature rose, which blooms so prolifically, and it also stays kind of low, so it doesn't detract from what is growing behind it. And obviously wonderful pink to grow companion plants with it. Previously in the spring, my vivid pink Dianthus from Southern Living, it was also growing in conjunction with it, and it was a perfect color echo. I need to deadhead that now, but that's a good perennial to grow along with it. I also have in the back another white variety that grows a little bit taller. It is not in bloom anymore. It's already finished blooming. It's blooming in tandem with this Minoan lace. But you can see that it also is very tough, disease resistant, not a hint of black spot on these leaves. And this one is Lady Diana, or Diana, I believe. It's a beautiful white. Now, one thing about this is it did get rose rosette, and I dug the original plant out, but it had layered itself as propagation, and the new plant that it came from, or the new plant that came from the mother plant, is almost as large as the original, and it started out also as just a 1-gallon plant. So really good ground cover, blooming ground cover, tough as nails, and can handle very, very difficult locations. Now, I would encourage you to look at the other colors of drift roses. Right now I have my eye on a Coral Beauty that it's growing and actually in front of the Hideaway Pizza. I noticed the color. I love that deep peachy pink, and I think that it's going to be on my list of plants that I'm starting to compose for the future. So that would be number 1, tough as nails, blooming shrub, can also handle street side exposure, and that is drift roses. Now let's move on to my number 2. Well, as long as I'm here, let me give you 1.5. I believe these are called Black Diamond. I need to check my records. But these are shrub-like crepe myrtles. Now, I love them because these tend to be disease resistant. They can also handle really brutal sun, and I love the way they bloom in the dead of summer when other things are not in bloom. Now, I love crepe myrtles and I love growing them as trees, but recently I have found that so many beautiful beautiful, really old specimens died in that Arctic blast and froze back to the ground, that now I'm thinking of them more as using as a plant used as an application for a shrub, for a hot as the Dickens kind of purview like this one, rather than a small tree. That's just me, and it leads me to my question of the day. What has been your experience with crepe myrtles, especially those of you that live in Texas, Arizona, in parts of the South that also experience that Arctic blast? Did yours freeze back all the way to the ground? But as a blooming shrub, I really think it can be an exceptional plant. I love the dark foliage and the contrast against the other things that are growing, and it also looks beautiful in fall, and the blooms will be lovely. So now let's move on to my number 2. Well, pretty much everything right now seems to be in brutal sun, including number 2 on my list of bulletproof plants for really difficult hot and dry exposure or hot and dry conditions. And I think this gets my award as the most underused shrub, because I think it's just beautiful, not only because it performs so well and looks beautiful in the landscape, but also because it makes a beautiful cut branch to bring inside, and that is the category of abelias. This is one I planted several years ago. I believe this one was Gold Star Abelia, and it grows a little bit higher, and you can see right now that it is in a full southern exposure, and it's doing beautifully. And it also has this kind of lacy feature to it that I think looks and contrasts beautifully with other things. Here is a noisette rose that's almost past its prime or past its flowering in this heat, but the Abelia is just going strong. This is a green and yellow variegated one. But what I'm really loving are some of the abelias that grow a little bit shorter, particularly one of my favorites in the Southern Living Plant collection. This is Miss Lemon Abelia. And what I love about it is it not only makes a wonderful ground cover, and you'll notice here that it is in both part shade, but as the day ages, this will be in full sun, but it can handle part shade, which is another thing to commend these abelias. This is Miss Lemon, but also in the Southern Living Plant collection, there's one called, I believe, Confetti and Kaleidoscope that doesn't have the delicate yellow foliage of this. It's a little bit more bold. So those are some other abelias to try. There are some old-fashioned abelias that get huge and can be pruned into really almost small trees, though they tend to be less, I think, less beautiful in form and a lot more gangly. Probably one of my favorites that I'm also putting on my list, for future gardens, and that is Canyon Creek Abelia, because in the fall and late summer, maybe even at another time of year, it puts out the most beautiful blooms that attract pollinators, that attract butterflies, as do all of these abelias. And by the way, these also bloom, though unlike Canyon Creek, this Miss Lemon and some of the others, they will put out a small white flower that's sweet, but it's the foliage that steals the show, or the foliage that steals the show. But Canyon Creek, oh my gosh, the flowers are just beautiful in a fresh or a dried state. So you may notice, yes, I am starting to make my list of plants that I either want in this garden in the future, or more realistically in a future garden. And I'm adding Canyon Creek Abelia to that. So that would be number 2. Now let's move on to number 3. Well, I've talked a lot about the golden barberry, orange rocket barberry, and these baby gem boxwood, and these are all beautiful, and they do beautiful in these tough conditions and dry conditions, or just bulletproof plants. But what I really want to talk about is one I do not have. And again, you may see a thematic here as I'm starting to compose a list of things that I want in the future. And this one is Ceanothus americanus. I may have just brutalized that pronunciation, but it is a native, and it is, I think it's called California lilac. It comes in some beautiful blue tones that look gorgeous cascading down a wall. That one is hardy only to zone 7, and for us here we're kind of on the cusp. But there is another form, the americanus, that is a native form, and it blooms in white and is hardy to zone 3, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's wonderful for dry, hot, sunny aspects. So it's one that you might want to put on your list too, and look at the different varieties, both natives and nativars, or cultivars of natives. But it is one that blooms that can really handle tough conditions, and it's number 3 on my list. So now let's go to number 4. Now, you may think that this is what I just showed you, that it's a golden barberry, but number 4 is a southern living plant. It's sunshine ligustrum. It puts out this just absolutely stunning chartreuse foliage. I have not pruned it this year. I haven't done anything to it, but this is probably one of the hottest locations in my garden. It faces south, and I will probably give it a shear here before too long, but if you've got a hot and dry location, a plant that is not fussy, other than it does need a periodic trim to keep it in bounds, then look no further than this sunshine ligustrum. Now, some ligustrum can be problematic. They can be overly aggressive, maybe even invasive, but sunshine is cultivated, so I have not found that to be the case, and it definitely is a beautiful, it's functioning according to my muse this year, which is purple and yellow, or purple and gold in the garden. It looks beautiful with these gorgeous alliums blooming in the foreground, or this gorgeous purple larkspur blooming in front of it. Anything in that deep blue or deep purple hue. It also looks great growing with any kind of sunflowers or herbs or things like that growing in front of it. It's tough as nails, and it's absolutely beautiful. Now, another plant that I think it would look good with, also I don't have here to show you, but let's call this 3.5, or are we 4.5, Stuart?
One of the two.
And that would be Vitex plants, because they are one of the kind of lavender blooming gray foliaged shrubs. Stuart, we need to insert a picture of one here. Yep. That is, I think, just gorgeous. It's got that kind of Mediterranean California vibe that I so love. Those long conical shape spires of lavender blooms, and it can be pruned beautifully to open up the canopy and be a small shrub, or a small tree, not unlike what we did to Stuart's his most favorite plant in my garden, the Chinese snowball Viburnum. So I think that this ligustrum would look beautiful in conjunction if you had a little bit bigger space than mine with a Vitex. It also makes a good small tree and can be used out in the center in the open in a landscape, but also can be tucked, I think, into garden beds. So now let's move, before my voice gets out, because I've done a lot of shooting and a lot of talking today, let's move on to my next bulletproof shrub. Stuart, this may be the first time that we are intentionally shooting in bad light, or in other words, really blown out sun, so that we can show empirically that all of these shrubs that I'm showing you can indeed handle the 90+ degree temperatures we've got today, and all of this sun in an area that doesn't get a whole lot of moisture. So this is the Viburnum I have showed you before. This is all that glitters, but I also like all that glows. Southern Living also has some that I've had a hard time getting. I think it's called Little Joey Viburnum, but there are a number of different varieties of cultivars. And what I find interesting about all the Viburnums is that the foliage is so different from one variety to another. Sometimes it's real leathery and blue, sometimes it's glossy and green like this, sometimes the leaves are larger and sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they have more of a kind of a lance-like form, and sometimes they have more of an obelisk form like this, ovalesque form. So it really depends, but there's probably a viburnum that would meet every need for a really hot and brutal environment like this. One consideration you might want to take into account is just how tall do they get. So do you want one that is low growing or one that will grow taller and be a small tree? But either way, they are absolutely handsome and beautiful, and I'm kind of anxious to research new varieties that are out there that I'm not familiar with. Now, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm about to lose my voice, Stuart, with another variety, a separate kind of plant that I am starting to incorporate into my own yard and am even selling. And this is a buddleia, or a butterfly bush. This one is a Prince Charming monarch. It blooms beautifully. I don't have any of these smaller, mounding, more compact blooming butterfly bushes in my garden, and I want to add one because increasingly, as I've said 100 times, I'm using less blooming perennials and annuals and a lot more blooming shrubs. And I want to fill that gap in late summer when other things aren't in bloom, and I still want flowers for cutting and for landscape value. So I'm including butterfly bushes in my tough as nails or bulletproof shrub category, particularly some of the new varieties like this Prince Charming that are smaller, more compact in form. In some areas, again, know thy garden, know thy zone, and consider good garden fit. In some areas, I hear these can be problematic, maybe even invasive. They can be thuggish. In my garden, that is definitely not the case, and I have not heard that to be the case in Oklahoma, but maybe in other environs where it is wetter and the climate is a little bit more receptive to really aggressive growth, they could get overly large and maybe could spread too aggressively. But this category that is smaller and is a good butterfly attractor, despite the fact it may not attract larvae at all stages, nevertheless, I'm definitely adding this to my list. So there is number 5 and 5.5, a way for us to get a few cheats in, Stuart, on some of my favorite plants, both for now and in my future garden. Well, Stuart said that the topic we did today warranted my kind of African safari look because it's all, it's all about heat and drought and that kind of thing. So, starting from top to bottom, my pith helmet, I got this one off of Amazon, but I must tell you that I had a pith helmet I had for years that I actually wore in Africa because my husband and I went to Tanzania to the Selous Game Reserve for 3 weeks for our honeymoon many years ago, and I had one that I wore then, but finally I'd had it for so long. So this is another one you can get this online, and I'll provide a link if you're interested. My top is thrifted. I don't even know what brand it is, but it is thrifted. My go-to sunglasses are just my Ray-Ban Wayfarers. My earrings are the same ones that I had on yesterday. These are just silver hoops. I think I got these at Eden Boutique. My breeches are my working pants for the week. These are Banana Republic. I got these at, I think, at an outlet store. And my boots are Dover Saddlery. My bracelets are the same that I had on yesterday. I just repeated it. This belonged to my mother-in-law, and this is just an assortment of other ones. And a lot of you have asked about my Apple Watch band. Now, I wear this because I really do track what kind of workout I get in the garden, and I find an Apple Watch to be indispensable for that, and tracking all of the steps that I get in when I am intentionally inefficient walking back and forth. But this chain link watch band I got off of, I believe I got it online off of Amazon, and we did have to take out all sorts of extra links. I've got kind of tiny wrists. So there you go. Stuart, have I forgotten anything?
I don't think so.
There, and a huge layer of sunscreen today. So there you go. There is my outfit of the day.